It wasn't the wind screaming outside my own windows, or the sight of snowdrifts swallowing the streetlights. It was the silence. The dead, terrifying silence crackling through my phone, where the familiar, comforting rumble of my parents' furnace should have been. Then my mother's voice, thin and brittle as ice. Sarah, oh Sarah, it's so cold. The heat, it just stopped working. Completely. My own breath hitched, freezing in my chest. Miles away, buried under the worst blizzard in 50 years, my elderly parents David and Martha were trapped. No heat. Temperatures plummeting below zero. A random, tragic furnace failure? My gut screamed no. A sickening certainty, cold and sharp as a shard of glass, pierced through the panic. This wasn't fate. This wasn't bad luck. I knew with a chilling conviction that made me feel sick, that my own brother Kevin and his viper-like wife Linda had orchestrated this nightmare. They'd visited just hours before. They'd left our frail parents stranded deliberately, counting on the storm to hide their cruelty. What they didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was the ghost from my husband Mark's past, an old army brother, who now held the power to turn their vicious gamble into absolute ruin. They thought they were clever. They thought they were safe. They had fatally underestimated us. Before that call shattered everything, life had a rhythm, predictable and grounding, especially here in the northern Midwest where winter isn't just a season, it's a force you respect. I'm Sarah, and like so many women my age, I found myself sandwiched, managing my own career, my own family, while also being the main point person for my aging parents, David and Martha. They were the bedrock kind of people, honest, hardworking, content in their paid-off little house on a few wooded acres just outside town. They'd saved, lived simply, and cherished their independence. Dad's arthritis slowed him down, making him less able to handle sudden crises, and Mom, while sharp as a tack mentally, was physically becoming more frail. Their cozy home was their world. My husband Mark is my anchor. We found each other after his army days were done, and his quiet competence and unwavering loyalty were qualities I treasured. Qualities that seemed increasingly alien to my brother Kevin. Mark never hesitated to help with Mom and Dad. He'd fix a leaky pipe, wrestle with the heavy storm windows, shovel their long, winding driveway without a word of complaint. He knew they were my heart and he treated them like his own. Our weeks fell into a pattern. Several times a week I'd drive over, bringing groceries, helping manage pills, taking them to doctor's appointments. We'd sit at their worn kitchen table, drinking coffee, the air smelling faintly of Dad's woodworking projects and Mom's cinnamon tea. Simple moments, conversations about birds at the feeder or the upcoming church bazaar. I'd check the furnace before every cold season, making sure it was serviced, the filters clean. Their safety was a constant background hum in my mind, a worry I managed with checklists and precautions. Felt normal, manageable. The static disrupting this quiet frequency was my brother Kevin and his wife Linda. Kevin always craved more. A bigger house, a flashier car, a level of success that perpetually eluded him. Linda, with her overly bright smile that never warmed her calculating eyes, fueled his discontent. They lived closer to Mom and Dad than we did, about an hour away, but their visits had been sporadic until recently. Suddenly, maybe 6 months ago, their interest in my parents had intensified, but it didn't feel like affection. Felt opportunistic. Like vultures circling. I'd occasionally overhear snippets of their tense phone calls, hushed arguments about bills, whispers about being stretched too thin despite their attempts to project affluence. The first real alarm bell clanged late that summer. The air was still warm, humming with cicadas, but Kevin brought up winter heating costs during a Sunday dinner. "Wow, Dad must take a fortune to keep this place warm," he said, swirling his iced tea, trying to sound casual. "Getting to be a big place for just the two of you. Maybe something easier might make sense eventually." Dad just made a non-committal noise, eyes fixed on the football game. But I saw Mom's hand tremble slightly as she reached for her water glass. Later, after Kevin and Linda left, leaving behind a faint trail of expensive perfume and unease, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Kevin keeps asking about our finances, Sarah," she whispered, worry clouding her eyes. "About the house deed, our savings. He says he's just trying to help us plan, but it feels pushy." I tried to smooth it over. "He probably worries, Mom. Wants to make sure you're set. But the explanation felt thin, inadequate. Kevin rarely worried about anyone but Kevin. Linda was even less subtle. She'd wander through the house, trailing her fingers over the antique furniture, her gaze lingering a little too long on Mom's jewelry box or Dad's collection of framed war medals. "Everything is so substantial," she'd commented once, picking up a heavy crystal vase. It sounded less like admiration, more like she was mentally calculating its resale value. She started dropping comments about how exhausted Mom and Dad seemed, how the upkeep must be so taxing, primarily on me, of course. "You do so much, Sarah, bless your heart," she'd sigh, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. Wouldn't it be a relief for everyone if they were in a nice facility, where professionals could handle all this? The implication was clear: a nursing home. The very thing Mom and Dad dreaded, the kind of place that necessitated selling off the life they'd built piece by piece, starting with the house. Then came the afternoon I arrived to find Kevin's car already there. He was supposed to be at work. I walked in quietly and heard his low, urgent voice coming from Dad's small study, the door slightly ajar. "Just makes things cleaner, Dad. Power of attorney. If something suddenly happens, avoids probate court, simplifies everything." I deliberately scraped my shoe on the mat and pushed the door open wider. Kevin startled, quickly sliding a sheaf of papers under a newspaper. "Sarah, didn't hear you come in. Just helping Dad sort through some old files." His face was flushed and he avoided my eyes. Dad looked bewildered, rubbing his temples. That night, sleep wouldn't come easily. The pieces were clicking into place, forming an ugly picture. The financial questions, the talk of nursing homes, the push for legal control over their affairs. It wasn't concern. Felt like a campaign. A slow, insidious siege targeting my parents' independence and assets. What exactly were they planning? The question hung in the air like the first chill of winter, heavy and foreboding. The subtle probing soon escalated into overt attempts to undermine me and isolate my parents. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one designed to make me look incapable and them indispensable. Linda developed a habit of calling Mom minutes before my scheduled arrival time. "Oh, Martha, are you sure Sarah remembered to refill that heart medication? She has so much on her plate, poor thing, I just worry something crucial might slip her mind." By the time I walked in, Mom would be fluttering with anxiety, questioning me about tasks I'd already handled, making me feel defensive and frustrated. Kevin played the concerned expert. "Sarah, I was reading about a new treatment for Dad's arthritis," he'd say in front of them. "Are you sure his current doctor is up on the latest research? Maybe we should get a second opinion." Or Mom looks a bit pale. "Did you check her blood pressure today? Perhaps she shouldn't be doing any housework at all." Every suggestion implied my care was lacking, positioning him as the more vigilant child. Their help became actively disruptive. Linda offered to go through Mom's mail and pay some bills one afternoon while I ran errands. A week later, a final notice arrived for the homeowner's insurance. Linda feigned utter shock. "Oh goodness. I must have put that aside to double-check something and forgot. I'm so terribly sorry." The late fees and frantic calls to reinstate the policy fell to me, of course. It felt deliberate, calculated to make managing their affairs seem too burdensome for me. They started showing up unannounced, often when they knew I was scheduled to be there, bringing redundant groceries or offering rides to appointments I'd already arranged. It created chaos and confusion for Mom and Dad, making my careful planning seem haphazard. They were actively shouldering me aside, not with brute force, but with a suffocating blanket of feigned helpfulness. The breaking point for my patience came during a sweltering day in late autumn. I'd arranged for Timmy, the teenager down the road, to mow the lawn while I took Mom for a lengthy eye exam. As I helped Mom slowly out of the car upon our return, I saw Kevin's gleaming SUV in the drive. He was standing on the porch, holding out cash to a bewildered-looking Timmy. "Don't you worry about settling up with Sarah," Kevin declared, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Linda and I will handle these expenses from now on. Just want to make sure Mom and Dad's money is being managed responsibly." Heat flooded my face, a sickening mix of fury and humiliation. He was publicly insinuating I was misusing my parents' funds, right in front of Timmy and potentially Mrs. Gable next door, whose curtains twitched. Mom gasped softly beside me. I marched straight up the steps. Kevin, what on earth do you think you're doing? I already arranged payment with Timmy. He turned, adopting his most pious expression. Just trying to lighten your load, sis. Protecting Mom and Dad. Making sure there are no irregularities. You seem stretched so thin. Linda appeared at his elbow, nodding sadly. We just worry, Sarah. We love them so much. It was textbook gaslighting. Twisting their interference into concern, making me the villain for objecting. Mark, when I recounted the incident later, his jaw tight, said, "This is escalating, Sarah. They're testing boundaries, seeing what they can get away with. People who act like this, they don't stop. They push until they get what they want." A cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I started meticulously documenting everything: dates, times, specific comments, the insurance fiasco, the lawnmower incident. I created a timeline. I didn't know exactly what I was preparing for, but my instincts screamed that a storm was coming, and it had nothing to do with the weather. Kevin and Linda weren't just angling for control anymore. It felt like they were setting the stage for something drastic, something final. Then the blizzard hit. Not just snow, but an Arctic onslaught. It descended with terrifying speed, a whiteout vortex driven by hurricane-force winds. Snow piled up in monstrous drifts, burying cars, snapping power lines like twigs under the immense weight of ice. The governor declared a state of emergency. Stay home. Stay off the roads. Period. My house was 45 minutes from Mom and Dad's on a clear day. Now it felt like the other side of the moon. We were snowed in tight. Mark and I watched the skeletal trees thrash against a gray sky, the wind howling like a starving wolf. My first panic thought was my parents. I called immediately. Mom answered, her voice surprisingly steady then. "We're snug as bugs, dear. Furnace is chugging away, pantry's full. You just worry about yourselves." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was shallow, fleeting. Their house was older, more vulnerable. "Promise me you'll call if anything changes?" I pleaded. "Anything at all?" She promised. A few hours slid by, the storm intensifying. Mid-afternoon my phone buzzed. It was Kevin. His voice was unnervingly cheerful, almost manic. "Hey Sarah. Just touching base. Linda and I popped over to see Mom and Dad earlier this morning before it got really bad. Dropped off some extra blankets and soup. They seemed totally fine. All cozy." My stomach clenched. "You went over there? In this?" It was completely out of character. "How were they? The furnace was okay?" Yeah, fine, he said dismissively. "Place felt like a sauna. Anyway, roads are impossible now, we barely made it home. Just wanted you to know they were okay before everything shut down." He clicked off before I could probe further. His forced cheerfulness felt wrong. His description, sauna, seemed exaggerated. But I tried to dismiss the suspicion. Maybe, just maybe, they were actually being helpful for once. Darkness fell early, thick and oppressive. The wind shrieked, rattling our storm windows. Around 8 p.m. my phone screamed its insistent ring. Her voice was thin, laced with pure panic. "Sarah, the heat, it's gone. Guess died. It's getting so cold." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, Mom? Did you check the thermostat? Did a breaker trip?" "Dad checked everything," she sobbed. "Twice. Stone cold. We called Kevin right away, but he said the roads are impassable, nothing he can do. He said maybe it's just an old fuse or something." An old fuse? In the middle of a historic blizzard with no possibility of repair? My mind flashed to Kevin's visit. Place felt like a sauna. And now, nothing. I felt bile rise in my throat. "Mom, listen. Stay calm. Use all the blankets. What about the fireplace? Dad hasn't used it in years." Her voice trembled. "He's afraid the chimney might be blocked. He doesn't want to risk smoke. Or worse." Sharp, biting fear gripped me. They were trapped. Elderly, increasingly frail, in a rapidly freezing house, with no safe way to generate heat. I frantically called Kevin back. He answered, his voice laced with impatience. "Sarah, I already told Mom there's nothing anyone can do. The roads are closed. It's probably just some safety switch Dad bumped. They'll have to bundle up." Stop panicking. Kevin, it's going below zero tonight. My voice cracked. They could get hypothermia. This is life or death. Look, I didn't cause the blizzard. He snapped, his voice hard. Linda and I were just there hours ago and it was working perfectly fine. Maybe Dad messed with the thermostat too much. They'll survive one cold night. He hung up. One cold night. The callousness stunned me. Panic turned into a sickening certainty. This wasn't negligence. This was deliberate. Kevin and Linda hadn't just visited. They'd sabotaged the furnace. They'd used the cover of the storm, knowing no one could reach Mom and Dad, knowing they'd be terrified, vulnerable, maybe hoping the cold would push them over the edge, or at least scare them enough to finally agree to leave their home. The monstrosity of it stole my breath. All night, I paced like a caged animal, calling Mom every hour, her voice growing weaker, her words more slurred with cold each time. Dad tried to sound strong. We're tough, Sarah girl, doing okay. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The image of Kevin's smug face, Linda's fake sympathy, it burned behind my eyes. My fear wasn't just for their safety anymore. It was laced with a white-hot, righteous fury. They planned this. They left them. That endless night finally bled into a desolate, frozen dawn. The snow had stopped, but the world was entombed in white, silent except for the distant groan of early plows on the main highways. Side roads, like the one leading to my parents' house, remained impassable for anything less than a tank. Mark, leaning on his military grit, finally got through to the county sheriff's dispatch again, relentlessly emphasizing the age, the lack of heat, the critical situation. They finally agreed to divert a deputy with a heavy-duty 4x4 as soon as one was available. Waiting for that call back felt like stretching on a rack. Minutes turned into glacial hours. Finally the phone rang. A weary-sounding deputy. Ma'am, reached your parents. They're okay. Extremely cold but conscious and responsive. Found em huddled under every blanket they own. The house is like a walk-in freezer though. Furnace is definitely dead. Relief hit me like a physical blow, buckling my knees. Alive. They were alive. As soon as the town plowed the main artery leading towards their road, Mark fired up his rugged four-wheel drive truck. The drive was treacherous, navigating deep drifts and icy patches. Pulling into their unplowed driveway felt like arriving at an Arctic outpost. Frost-painted eerie ferns on the inside of the window panes. Stepping inside was like plunging into icy water. The cold bit at our lungs. Mom and Dad were on the sofa, buried in layers, their faces pale and etched with exhaustion, but their eyes lit up with profound relief when they saw us. Mom clung to me, weeping silently. Dad gripped Mark's arm, his knuckles white. Thought you wouldn't make it, he rasped. While I fussed over them, wrapping them in fresh warm blankets brought from our house, getting hot broth into them, Mark went straight to the basement. He knows his way around basic mechanics but isn't an HVAC pro. He emerged grim-faced. Nothing obvious, Sarah. No leaks, breakers are fine. Gist, looks dead. I immediately called our trusted heating company's emergency line. Explaining the situation, elderly couple, no heat since last night, blizzard conditions, put us at the top of their list. Late that afternoon, Gus, the technician, arrived, his truck looking like it had battled glaciers to get there. He was a solid man with reassuringly capable hands. He headed straight for the basement furnace room. Mark and I paced upstairs, the silence punctuated by metallic clangs and Gus's occasional muttered curses from below. After what felt like an age, he clumped back up the basement stairs, holding something small in his hand, his expression hard. He looked directly at Mark, then me. Folks, he said, his voice low and serious. This furnace didn't just stop working. My heart hammered against my ribs. What do you mean, Gus? I mean, he said, holding up a small piece of wire, the copper ends gleaming where they'd been cleanly severed. This low-voltage wire to the ignition control? It wasn't chewed by mice, it didn't fray or short out. It was cut. Deliberately. With wire cutters. He gestured back towards the basement. And the main gas shut-off valve to the burner? It was cranked closed. Manually. Someone who knew exactly how to disable this unit without causing an explosion did this. And judging by the lack of dust on the valve handle, they did it very recently. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. It was true. Every dark, ugly suspicion confirmed in Gus's grim words. Kevin and Linda. They had stood in that basement likely while my parents were upstairs unaware and calmly, coldly cut the wire, turned the valve and walked away, leaving them to freeze. Hot, furious tears blurred my vision. Mark's posture changed. The easygoing husband vanished, replaced by the soldier. His eyes turned to steel. Intentionally cutting off heat to elderly people during a blizzard, his voice was dangerously soft, vibrating with controlled rage. That's not just cruel. That's felony endangerment. That's elder abuse. He looked at me, his gaze intense. We have to report this, Sarah. This goes way beyond family drama. Report it? My mind scrambled. The police? Social services? Felt huge, complicated. Then Mark froze, his eyes widening slightly as a memory surfaced. Wait. James, he murmured, snapping his fingers softly. James Carmichael. My buddy from basic training. Haven't seen him in years, but we connected online recently. Said he took a big job with the state. Something about protecting seniors. He whipped out his phone, thumbs flying across the screen. Let me just see if I can find his number. It's a long shot, but maybe he knows the right channels. He found it, stepped into the hallway for better reception. I held my breath, straining to hear his side. James? Mark Evans. Yeah, man, it's been too long. Listen, I'm calling because I'm in a hell of a situation. My wife's parents. Trapped in the blizzard, heat went out. But James, it wasn't accidental. Looks like sabotage. A long pause. Mark listened intently, his eyebrows shooting up. Hold on, you're the director? Director of the whole damn agency? The State Elder Abuse and Protective Services Agency? Holy cow, James, I had no idea. Well, listen, you are not going to believe what happened here. My own jaw hit the floor. Mark's old army pal wasn't just some caseworker. He was the head honcho. The person ultimately in charge of investigating exactly this kind of monstrous behavior. Kevin and Linda, in their arrogant greed, had unwittingly targeted the family of someone with a direct line to the one person who could bring the full weight of the state down upon them. A cold, almost giddy sense of clarity washed over me. The game had just changed. Checkmate was coming. Armed with Gus's detailed report and the quiet, steely assurance from James Carmichael, Director of State Elder Abuse Protective Services, we knew our path forward. James was incandescently angry after hearing the full story from Mark. This is precisely the kind of predatory behavior my agency exists to combat, he'd said grimly. Intentional endangerment, exploiting vulnerability during a disaster. We will pursue this vigorously. He advised documenting everything, securing Gus's statement, and confirmed an official investigation was already being launched based on the evidence. He also understood the painful family dynamics involved. Sometimes, James had counseled Mark, a direct confrontation is necessary for the victim's sense of closure, even while we handle the legal side. Just be smart about it. So, we planned it like a military operation. A few days crawled by. Mom and Dad were recovering, the trauma slowly receding as the house stayed blessedly warm. The new high-tech furnace Mark insisted on installing hummed reassuringly in the basement. Then I made the call. I kept my voice deliberately light, almost breezy, masking the icy resolve beneath. Kevin, Linda, hi, it's Sarah. Listen, Mom and Dad feel it's important we all get together. Have a proper family meeting to talk about, well, future planning. Making sure they're secure, especially after that awful furnace scare. How about Sunday afternoon? A beat of silence. Then Kevin's voice, dripping with poorly concealed eagerness. Yes, Sarah, absolutely. Great idea. We were so worried. We definitely need to make sure they have a solid plan going forward. He clearly thought the furnace incident was their golden ticket. The proof Mom and Dad couldn't cope alone. The leverage they needed to push for the nursing home and control of the assets. They suspected nothing. Sunday dawned clear and frigid. We made one addition to the guest list. Mrs. Gable, my parents' sharp, no-nonsense next-door neighbor and friend of 40 years. We explained we needed her clear head and moral support. She'd never trusted Kevin or Linda and was fiercely protective of my parents. Her presence added an unimpeachable witness. Kevin and Linda arrived right on time, bearing a box of cloyingly sweet pastries and faces plastered with concern. Mom, Dad, well, you look worlds better. We were beside ourselves with worry. Linda enveloped Mom in a hug that seemed possessive rather than comforting. Kevin clapped Dad on the shoulder with false heartiness. Good to see you bounced back, Pop. Scary business, that old furnace finally kicking the bucket, huh? We led them into the living room, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Mom and Dad sat side by side on the sofa, looking smaller than usual, but their jaws were set. Mark stood near the fireplace, radiating calm authority. I took a position nearby. Mrs. Gable settled into her usual armchair, her gaze missing nothing. After the obligatory small talk withered, I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch for a moment. We asked you here, I began, my voice level and clear, because we need to address what really happened during the blizzard. About the furnace. Kevin immediately seized the opening. Exactly. Terrible timing, but maybe a blessing in disguise. It just proves our point, doesn't it? This big old house. It's becoming too much. Maybe now is the time to seriously consider. It didn't kick the bucket, Kevin, I interrupted sharply, cutting through his manipulative preamble. I locked eyes with him. It was deliberately disabled. The fake smile melted off Linda's face like wax near a flame. Kevin blinked rapidly, processing. What? Disabled? Sir, that's crazy talk. Is it? Mark stepped forward then, holding Gus's signed, notarized report. Gus, the furnace technician? He came out the day after the storm. He found the main gas valve to the burner assembly manually shut off. Tight. Mark paused, letting the words hang in the air. And this, he held up the small, snipped wire encased in a clear evidence bag, is the ignition control wire. Gus confirmed it wasn't broken or frayed, Kevin. It was cut. With wire cutters. A profound, suffocating silence fell over the room. Kevin stared, mesmerized, at the wire in the bag, then whipped his head towards Mark, his face starting to turn a sickly gray. Linda's eyes darted wildly between us, like a trapped animal seeking escape. That's impossible, Kevin stammered, his voice suddenly hoarse. The technician must be wrong. Or maybe Dad was tinkering down there. Dad spoke, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. Kevin, I haven't been near that furnace's controls since you were wearing diapers. Then who? Kevin blustered, trying to regain footing on ground that was rapidly turning to quicksand. Who would do that? A random prowler during the worst blizzard ever? The only people confirmed to be in this house just hours before the heat mysteriously died. During that blizzard, were you and Linda, I stated, my voice like ice chips. You told me yourself you visited. You said it was a sauna. Then suddenly my parents are freezing, potentially dying, and you tell me over the phone they'll survive one cold night. Linda shot to her feet, her voice shrill. This is slander. How dare you accuse us? We brought them soup. We were worried sick. Were you? Mark's voice dropped, low and lethal. Or did you use the storm, disable the heat, and leave two vulnerable elderly people to face lethal cold, hoping it would either finish them off or scare them into giving up their home and their savings to you? Never. Kevin yelled, his face now mottled red and white. We would never do such a thing. The physical evidence says otherwise, Mark countered, his gaze unwavering. And so will the state investigators. He let that sink in before delivering the final blow. You see, after Gus left, I made a call. Just catching up with an old friend from my army days. James Carmichael. Kevin and Linda exchanged blank, uncomprehending looks. The name meant nothing. Their world was small, centered on their own greed. Mark continued, his voice precise, deliberate. Turns out my old friend James isn't just some desk jockey. He's the director. The actual director of the State Elder Abuse and Protective Services Agency. If Kevin's face had been pale before, it now turned the color of ash. Linda let out a choked gasp, stumbling back slightly, her hand fluttering at her throat. Their jaws literally dropped. The carefully constructed facade of concern shattered, revealing the raw, ugly panic beneath. Director Carmichael, Mark emphasized the title, was extremely interested in Gus's professional findings. The cut wire. The closed valve. The timing coinciding precisely with your visit and the blizzard trapping them. The clear motive of financial gain. He was particularly interested in the concept of intentional endangerment resulting in potentially lethal conditions. Mark paused, letting them fully absorb the implications. An official state investigation is already active, Kevin. They're looking at felony charges. Mrs. Gable drew a sharp, audible breath. Mom buried her face in Dad's shoulder, silent tears streaming down her face. Dad put a protective arm around her, his expression a mixture of profound grief and grim resolve. Kevin collapsed back into his chair as if his legs had given out, utterly speechless. Linda swayed, looking like she might vomit or faint. The smug assurance they'd walked in with had utterly disintegrated, replaced by the stark terror of exposure and imminent, severe consequences. Seeing that primal fear mirrored in their eyes, the same fear they had so callously inflicted on my parents, wasn't revenge in the petty sense. It was the heavy, satisfying thud of justice beginning its inevitable work. The fallout wasn't explosive but methodical and crushing. James Carmichael's agency conducted a thorough investigation. Gus's testimony, the physical evidence, phone records showing Kevin and Linda's initial visit and subsequent dismissive calls during the crisis, plus statements from Mom, Dad, Mark, myself, and Mrs. Gable built an irrefutable case. Their financial desperation, maxed-out credit cards, a second mortgage they couldn't afford, quickly surfaced, providing clear motive. Faced with undeniable evidence and the very real threat of felony prosecution and prison time for endangerment, Kevin and Linda accepted a plea deal. They avoided incarceration, but the consequences were severe and public. They received several years of strict probation, were hit with substantial fines and restitution orders, covering the cost of the emergency repairs and the new furnace, mandated counseling for anger management and financial responsibility, and crucially, a permanent restraining order forbidding any contact with Mom and Dad or setting foot on their property. Their names were also added to the state's official elder abuse registry, a permanent public record branding them for their actions. Within the family in our small town, the news spread like wildfire. The sheer calculated cruelty of their actions shocked everyone. Kevin and Linda became instant pariahs. Invitations dried up. Awkward silences followed them in the grocery store. Former friends crossed the street to avoid them. The social ostracization was profound, a constant public reminder of their disgrace. Their carefully cultivated image was shattered, replaced by the ugly truth. For Mom and Dad, the emotional scars took time to fade. The betrayal by their own son cut deeper than the cold ever could. We installed a top-tier security system alongside the new furnace. Mark or I made sure to connect with them daily, rebuilding their sense of safety layer by layer. They never mentioned Kevin or Linda again. It was a silent agreement. That chapter was closed, that relationship excised like a tumor. Slowly, the light returned to their eyes. They started enjoying Dad's workshop and Mom's gardening again, finding peace within their familiar walls, secure in the knowledge they were safe and protected. Reflecting on it all, it still feels like a dark fairy tale with a strangely modern twist. The sheer audacity of their plan, the terror of that endless night, the improbable intervention of Mark's past connection. It underscores how vulnerable our elders can be, but also how resilience and unexpected allies can turn the tide. There was no dramatic, movie-style revenge scene. My satisfaction didn't come from seeing them suffer exactly, but from seeing the system work. It came from the quiet certainty that their attempt to prey on the vulnerable met a firm, just, and unavoidable consequence. Knowing that James, a man dedicated to protecting seniors, was the instrument of that justice felt like a profound affirmation that sometimes, the universe does find a way to balance the scales. Life now is quieter, simpler. The corrosive presence of Kevin and Linda is gone. We're more vigilant, perhaps, more aware of the shadows that can lurk even within families. But mostly we're at peace. The house remains warm, a true sanctuary now, filled with the comforting scent of cinnamon and the knowledge that love, loyalty, and a well-timed phone call truly can conquer the coldest betrayals. And that deep, abiding warmth is the best resolution I could have ever asked for.